Namaste, a very good morning to one and all present here. I welcome you all to the second episode of Dialogue with Educationists. I'm Disha Jain, head of brand and PR at Metamorphosis. So we're an educate organization that enables entrepreneurial skill sets right from the school level. We empower students with the knowledge of an entrepreneur's life cycle, and we've recently launched the world's first school, which is the Metamorphosis School of Entrepreneurship. So, Dialogue with Educationists is one of its initiative, and this is basically a weekly exciting discussion with educationists across the globe on topics that trigger the conversations which are necessary for the progress, transformation, and the sustainability of today's education system. So, without any further delays, let me introduce to you the panelists we have today. We have with us Mrs. Lalita Naidu. She defines her journey in education with 3 words: purpose, passion, and pedagogy. With 30 plus years of experience in the leadership positions of the education industry, she's currently the principal of Meridian School, Madhapur. She headed a project called Ensuring Children Learn when she was the education officer and regional head at Aga Khan Education Service. She's the secretary for Indian Association for Preschool Education, a national level body. She has also been a member of Academic Resource Group of Government of Andhra Pradesh. Thank you, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So our second panelist we have is Mrs. Seeta Murthy, Director Education of Silver Oaks International Schools, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Visakhapatnam. She's an educator by profession, but a trainer by passion. Her 12 years of association with IBO and experience of implementing the IB programs in all the 4 schools she heads. For the last 7 years, she's been leading IB workshops in India. She's also led workshops in Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia as well. Times of India has recognized her as one of the promising leaders in their Lead India context. So very rightly, as she says, destiny of a nation begins in its classrooms. It is this belief which drives her to make schools as ecosystems for inspired learning. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today as well.
My pleasure. Thank you, Disha.
So our third panelist we have is Mrs. Shalini Nambiar. She has a very rich 26 plus years of experience in education and has been associated with Vibgyor Group, GD Goenka, the Heritage School, and GEMS Education. She aims to provide high-end training in leadership development and behavioral skill abilities. She recently conducted successful trainings at Dubai, Sri Lanka, and Mauritius. She's been a speaker at several national and international conferences, most recently being the one in London and Dubai. She's also received many awards and honors, some being Excellence in Leadership by Education Today and Women's Leader Icon in Education. Currently, she's the founder of SN Education Consultants. Thank you, ma'am. Glad to have you moderate the session today for us.
Thank you, Disha, so much.
Just to inform you guys, Mrs. Jyoti Reddy could not join us as there was a serious medical emergency at her end. So all our prayers with her, and we hope for a speedy recovery. So once again, I thank all of you for being a part and sharing your time with us on a Sunday morning to enlighten the thoughts of our viewers. I will be thrilled to be starting off this session. And I'm sure everyone with us today is very excited to hear you guys. So the very exciting topic which our panelists is reimagining how to sustain student engagement with virtual learning. We chose to converse on this topic today to understand how students, parents, and the school community are adapting themselves to online learning. So let's begin. And before we begin, just a couple of guidelines. Viewers, if you have any questions, it would be a request. You could put it in the Q&A section, which is at the bottom, and the panelists will address them. Also, panelists, we would be looking for an enriching conversation for the next 50 minutes, and the last 10 minutes would be the Q&A. So let's begin the session. I hand over the stage to Mrs. Shalini. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks Disha so much, and good morning everybody, and a warm welcome Mrs. Seeta and Mrs. Lalita. I'm honored to be with you, and I'm really looking forward, and thanks Disha for a very enriching and a hot topic, as I say, because I'm using the word hot because I'm from the hot city Delhi, which is the hottest zone right now, and yeah, COVID has taken over our lives and lives have changed. It's a new normal. We're virtual classroom where Zooms have become very, very popular. And it is different than a face-to-face class. Teachers are facing a lot of challenges. And of course, through this discussion, what my aim is that whoever is viewing it is able to take away some takeaways and to be able to ensure that they're able to engage the children in a virtual classroom. Because the challenge in a virtual classroom, which is humongous, is how do we keep the student engaged? It is not like face-to-face where there can be a personal touch or where you can call, because children are very smart. They can block you, they can mute you. So you are left with nothing, and we know it. I've experienced it because I've been part of the audit team of a lot of virtual classes which are being held all over. But it is very important for everybody to understand that though we have the entire technology, we are depending on it, but nothing can be impactful unless and until we have a teacher who's enthusiastic, full of energy, full of passion, because that makes a difference even to the kind of technology we are trying to use. And especially for people in my generation, where we will not call ourselves digitally high-tech people, but we have adapted, we have learned. And I'm sure a lot of teachers who were not used to it have got used to it now. So it's a hats off to each of you. And as I always say, teachers are the second most corona warriors of this country after the doctors, because they are taking care of the children. They are impacting those children. You're not only impacting the children, but you're impacting their families too. So it's a big hats off and a big salute to each one of you there. You can give yourself a virtual patch to yourself, because I can't hug you all, right? And I definitely look forward to hearing a lot of good, takeaways from Mrs. Lalita and Mrs. Sita. And I would like to ask you, Mrs. Lalita, because the new normal is virtual classrooms, and it is different than a face-to-face, because here you have everybody stuffed in these small windows, and so what do you feel is the difference between a face-to-face and a virtual classroom? Because I feel it is very important for a teacher to understand that, and for a student that there is a difference. So I would really like to know from you, what do you feel is the difference between the two? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Shalini. And first of all, I would like to wish all the teachers and all of us also a very happy Guru Purnima. It's a wonderful day on which this discussion is taking place. And I must say that this question is quite apt, because the last 3 months, we have been doing nothing but this. And in fact, what could be the actual difference between virtual learning and a face-to-face learning? Well, I can say that the face-to-face learning brings in that bond between the teacher and the taught. That is certainly something that is missing now, because a teacher assesses the mood of the child, of the children. She gets to know by looking at each child. And I must tell you, teachers have this wonderful memory. Within 2 days, when they are introduced to a new class, they will know the names of each child. They will know a lot more about the child than what, a normal person who interacts with the children for more than a month or so will know. So you will find that that bond develops between the teacher and the student. And that is something that, the virtual class can never give. Okay, so they are able to make out, by looking at the face of the children, they're able to make out, okay, she has understood. Although they have the verbal cues and the non-verbal cues, whether the student has understood, not understood, or otherwise. But other than those, the teacher is, by looking at the children, she's able to know, yes, my children have understood this. They have not understood this. They are not in this world. They are physically present, but mentally absent from the class, is something that the teacher knows just like that. Okay, so that I think is missing. Of course, teachers are, employing various tactics and techniques. I must tell that, our teachers were using blended learning model because we have the digital classrooms and others. But in spite of all that, it has never been that, the teacher has not physically seen the child, not, interacted with them. This was something, a new ball game altogether for the teachers. So when we actually faced with this shock of, starting off the virtual classrooms, I can say that yes, our teachers are quite young lot and they're pretty savvy, but we had a lot of questions: what platform to use, how do we take it forward? And after the first class, we had the teachers coming back, ma'am, all the children are making noise. It is difficult to control them. What do we do? So there were various trial and error methods. I think now, today, our teachers are pretty adept at this. They know how to hard mute the children. They know how to, to keep the students in order, even in a virtual classroom. But when we made the rules and regulations of how the classes have to be conducted and so on. But all said and done, nothing can replace the actual face-to-face learning at any given point of time. Okay, so practically, but the added advantage of virtual classrooms, I must tell, that practically everything, every organization has opened up their doors for free viewing, whether it is the zoos, the national parks, the museums all over the world, and the new discoveries of Google Earth, and how do they take them? They can take them for a view of the Mount Everest, or any of the other I saw the other day one of the teachers was taking volcanoes and she took them to Kilimanjaro. So these are things which are advantages for a virtual classroom, I should say. Then all the other things, there are the virtual labs that are available. So in a way, having virtual classes has got its own silver lining. I don't deny that. But the personal touch is missing. And then again, parents also, they have their own mindset. They feel they have been taught in a particular way. They don't understand that the generations have changed. And therefore, the methods of teaching are also not the same as what it was when they studied in schools. So they come with the baggage of, okay, this is how I was taught. So this is how my child has to be taught in the class. So those are things which are, slightly distracting and disturbing, because some of them are not so discerning and they end up entering into the classes and so on, which is all what we have addressed, we have oriented, we have spoken to them and other things. Now, to a large extent, yes, there is a semblance of order in all our virtual classrooms also, I should say. Yeah. Yes, Shalini ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Lalita. That was really interesting. And to add it further, I feel, I mean, when I look at the virtual class, I think there are two advantages which I really found it, like we've been talking about the 21st century skills, and I found it is very easy to implement when you're taking a virtual class. Second thing I liked is the personalized learning, which we can implement, and the extended hours. We can give a choice to the child. And regarding your parent, yes, it is, if there are any parents viewing, it is very important to understand as a parent that you need to trust the school, trust the teacher. We are qualified to teach kids. We are not qualified to teach parents. So when parents come in view and sit in the class and observe, the child is actually, your child is not learning because the child is confused whether I need to learn from the teacher or I need to learn from my parent. And actually it impacts the learning in a bigger way, which they're not realizing, because education It's not a very short-sighted goal, like, you know, you will see the results in a year or something. You see the results of a school education when the child is 30 and how he or she is able to manage his life. Is he able to manage failures? So I think it's a long-term perspective which parents must keep in mind, and let the school do its job. Your child will learn. You know, it's a law of nature. We did better than our parents. Our kids will do better than us. We also struggle. They're also struggling. So struggle is a part of learning. And I think that is a very nicely, Mrs. Lalita, you put it up. My next question is to you, Mrs. Sita. You've been handling like 4 schools. That's what I just heard. Amazing, yeah. And you're IB qualified, and IB is very close to my heart. I just, you know, I've been very closely associated with IB. I want to ask you how there are a lot of distractions now. You know, the child is at home, the teacher cannot be at home. The child suddenly finds his parents there. So naturally for him, it is, Mama, make my favorite dish, or Dad, make my favorite dish. Some children are thinking it's a holiday, they don't have a routine, so they get up and there's a lot of distractions. So it's a challenge for teachers also. How do you think we can keep the student engaged in a virtual classroom? It will be nice to know some of the strategies. You know, what is your take on that? Over to you.
So thanks, Shalini, for asking that question, which is a very pertinent question under the circumstances. While that question is relevant even in a regular face-to-face classroom, not just virtual classroom. In a virtual classroom, the teacher has to be an entrepreneur, like Metamorphosis. You know, she has to find different ways to engage students. And that is when content doesn't become the king. When content is the king, you can never engage children, whether in a face-to-face or a virtual classroom for that matter. So I will start saying like this to the question that you said. As a school, because I need to give our school's examples and sharing. As a school, we have always talked about character first, competence next. And when we said, what is character? Character is more about you, your responsibility, your integrity, your honesty, and things like that. So we always told them for the last 15 years, this is one thing that we tell them every day. You are coming to school for yourself. You are learning for yourself. It is not that you're answerable to your parents or your teachers that you should learn. You should learn because it is going to make a difference to you. Okay? So learner agency is something that we have been talking in a different language until IB came up with this term called learner agency. Okay? So it worked very well for us because we have always operated in a student-centric classroom for 15 years now. Students are used to the idea that this is my learning. I have to inquire and learn. I have to find ways to learn. I have to use my approaches to learning to understand a new topic. I have to use my approaches to learning to wade or navigate through this, you know, new channels of knowledge that are in front of me. So it worked in favor of us when we started the virtual school in April. Okay, in April we did not really run an online school because I debated a lot that, you know, are we going to do online learning or online school? Because the subtle difference back then was we didn't know how long this pandemic was going to last. We didn't know how long we have to work on a virtual platform back in April. Okay, so in April we only looked at how do we continue the learning pace. Okay, how do we engage the children without textbooks, without content being the king in the classrooms. So we found ways, like every morning we used to upload pre-recorded videos and some challenges and some engagements, and we would leave it open to them. Whenever you want, engage yourself. Within a week's time, turn in your task. Back then also we used Google Classroom, and now also we use a Google Classroom. Okay. We saw that both parents and children were highly enthusiastic, responding very well, because most of the engagements that we designed were family engagements, a science experiment, or, you know, economics, home economics, or, you know, how the supply chain management of vegetables and fruits are still going on in spite of the lockdown. These were the kind of engagements that we gave age appropriately. The questions were framed. So I could see more enthusiasm in parents back then. because nobody was working, everybody was at home. So if we give an engagement only related to a child, it could be a little boring. Okay, so we involved the whole family. So there was a lot of enthusiasm from the entire community to make videos and to show. They even went to the extent of creating their own YouTube channels for the family and uploading videos and things like that. So the tempo was built in April by creating learning engagements which children and the family together can work upon. So typically for a summer, which we normally do a holiday homework, are basically inquiries into various things depending on various contexts. We have done that too, and we were quite surprised to see the turn-in of summer tasks earlier, even before June. Okay, so we used a lot of maps of India. We shared, heritage maps, craft map, handloom map, music map of India. And then we gave engagements like, if you want to go on a heritage tour of India, from this map, make your own, holiday plan whenever things get better. So the whole family sat and they were to actually plan where will they start, who will they approach, what bookings will they do, which hotel will they stay, and when they go to that heritage monument, what is it that they're going to look for. So the whole thing was like a flow of plan. So April, May went very well. Now comes June, when you have to start your school year. Okay, now we call it online school. Now we don't call it online learning because we are running a routine. The routine is 8:30 to 2 o'clock now. Okay, now we explained and over communicated to the parent, because in these circumstances, over communication is better than under communication from the school side to the parents. So we over communicated to them saying that, why are we building this routine? Because for 2.5 months, children were at home. Entire home routine would have gone awry. Somebody wakes up at 7:30, children may wake up at 8:30, 9:30, but it is only school that can exert influence on children. Okay, so we made videos, talks, addressing children and shared it in the platforms that we use. So children were on board. Parents were very happy that the school is building a routine. So we created the ground to get children on board with us. And now we started from 8:30. What do we do? And we planned an assembly activity, a national song, a prayer, a pledge, and things like that to set the tone of the day. Then comes the learning part. Now, how do you engage children into learning? Okay, while content is important in a content specific country, okay, we are all obsessed with content in Asian countries, right? But we as a school have always been focusing on skills, approaches to learning, as an IB world we call. Okay, so we made all the engagements, all the content around how will you think about this? How will you communicate this? How will you manage yourself to handle this? So the focus was more on that. That got the children on board. In many webinars like this, people would debate about, if you don't hold a virtual class and the teacher doesn't lead a class with children, how will you get their attention? You will never get attention with long lectures. You will get attention when you know how to engage children and when they feel, I could do something in these 30 minutes. So we made a timetable wherein the task is given, they engage in the task, then they get onto the Google Meet to share how they worked on that task. Okay, so, and each task was so different, and every day we had an arrangement that every day 5 children will get to speak in each class. So that also gives an opportunity to share, because all children love talking, they love sharing what they have learned. So to your question about how do you get children on board, how do you get their attention, okay, is the art of learning is more important than art of teaching. So, back then when I was only a principal, not a director of education, till a few years ago, my nameplate used to be principal learner. Okay, I'm the first learner in the school. If I don't know how to learn, my teachers won't know how to learn, my students won't know how to learn. So, in simple words, I would say the success of online learning is because you should know how to engage them effectively. designing those stars is such a challenge, but such a pleasure. I can't tell you really. It's such a pleasure when you design those stars. Okay. Um, I don't know if I completely answered your question,
Yeah,
Shalini, but
you did.
I think getting their attention is not it is not to get their attention. It is to engage them that we have to work on. If you know how to engage them, how to challenge them. So there are 4 buzzwords that we usually use in all our lesson plans. Is this relevant to the children? Is this engaging enough? Is it significant enough? Could we make it challenging enough for the children that they will deep dive into it? So once we all these questions are answered, we know that they're on board with us.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sita. That was really amazing. And I loved your concept of principal learner. Walk the talk. I really, really appreciate that, because that's something amazing, because you have to, whatever you want people to follow, you need to do it yourself. And of course, I agree to the fact that principal is the first learner, right? And really helpful tips you gave. And in a nutshell, planning is extremely, extremely important. How do you plan a virtual class? And it has to be engaging, because you cannot have a lecture. What we talk about the flipped classroom, I think that's what I can understand. The stuff to be done in a class needs to be given beforehand, so that the children are aware of what you're going to do. They shouldn't be taken by surprise in a class, because virtual class is basically about discussions, about role plays, about collaboration. So children should be allowed to talk. In fact, I think that's a very important point you said. So planning, which takes a lot of time by a teacher, is extremely, extremely important. Designing the activities, and if she's able to make engaging activities, the class, she has won the class. And a very important point you said, the focus has to be not on teaching, because every teacher is good, she has the knowledge. The focus has to be on whether the child is learning, are we able to achieve the learning outcome planned for that particular class. And very beautifully you put up one point which I want to just add to that: the difference between project and project-based learning. In a nutshell, I love your concept of the children traveling through the map. I think that's a great takeaway from the session, where schools can really utilize, in my experience, because I've traveled all over the world, I've noticed, and I keep questioning my geography teacher in school, which is like long time back, and he's still there, that how come we Indians, we don't know how to read a map? You look at a foreigner, they know where to go south or west or north or east. We are totally confused. We have studied it, but we're not able to apply. So I loved that map concept from me, a big learning for me. Thank you so much, Mrs. Sita. Mrs. Lalita, again, I want to ask you, see, we know that the children learn because if they have a bond with the teacher, or whether they are in nursery or 8th or 12th, the bond is very, very essential. So how do you think a teacher can maintain that bond in a virtual class? What do you suggest a teacher can do that?
Yes, I think that's a very pertinent question. And when it comes to, how does a teacher develop a bond with the child? Now, you will find that, yes, this is something, a teacher has to work extensively, because she is not, in physical face-to-face touch with the children, but she's virtually in touch with them. Now, how does she develop that bond? So this requires, a constant, speaking by the teacher and the taught. The minute you make your class a one-sided one, which means you just talk, you give a lecture, and you go away. Okay, so then what happens is that bond will never develop. Only when you talk to them, when you interact with them, not necessarily like the content alone, but about various other things also. It can be, talking about the weather, talking about, the conditions in the country, talking about safety, talking about various other things, You know, and then children, they just love interacting.
Yeah.
So even after a class, you know, if you are spending some time, if you find that somebody has not been attentive in the class, the teacher can always call up a little later, speak to them, understand more about what is, you know, the reason why the child is not attentive enough in the class. And even for the children, you know, these times are definitely very tough. We all talk about, you know, ourselves, the teachers and everybody, but, you know, for the child has not had any interaction with the peers, and especially if the child is the only child. You know, if they have a sibling, at least they are having their fights, they're having something, you know, which keeps them busy. But when the child is a single child, then it becomes more difficult. And you know, these online classes definitely are a boon. You know, I have parents sometimes telling me, you know, ma'am, I don't know how your teachers manage so many children. It is simply impossible for us to manage just one child back at home. And they keep asking, you know, ma'am, did we get any information from the government when the schools are going to reopen? So, you know, these are things, but then a teacher definitely, you know, talks, writes. You know, sometimes I find this very interesting, you know. Teachers and the students, they write small notes to each other, and they kind of, you know, WhatsApp it to each other. It's so beautiful. I have seen children write so beautifully for their teachers. So this, again, you know, develops that little bond between the teacher and the taught. And you know, for the teacher also, now the teacher not only needs to befriend the child, the teacher needs to befriend the parent also. The closeness with the parent is very essential. They then, you know, together. Now, you know, when we talk about, okay, the school, the teacher, the parent and the school bring about the development of the child, you know, when we talk about this is actually happening now, because teacher will be coordinating more often with the parent, and the means of coordination again is pretty easy because of the technology. And you'll find that they are able to, you know, bring about the development in the child. Although, you know, you'll find that not having the personal touch is definitely a hindrance. So, but that apart, that's a given hindrance, and that should be just moved aside. But with what is there, make best use of the current opportunities that are there. You know, sometimes I feel, and we are holding everything. There's not a thing that we are not doing, whether it is competitions, debates. You know, there was just the other day, we had a turncoat competition where a student speaks for and against a given topic, you know. It was so beautifully done, and the children had come so well prepared. So not just the content, not just their subject, and not being mechanical is something a teacher needs to work on. You know, the minute you are very mechanical, the entire learning is very plastic. You know? So you will not really get to bond well and be with the, you know, child. And this apart, you know, the teacher also must encourage child-to-child interaction. So for this, you know, there are those lovely breakaway groups. I think, you know, these, you know, Zoom gives this, you know, scope for small breakaway groups where they have their group discussions. They come back and they make the presentation in the whole group. So these small tools are also very helpful in bringing about the bond, not only between the teacher and the taught, but between the peers as well. So these are, you know, some things that, I mean, it's amazing discovery, I should say. You know, technology is amazing, and discovery of how to use this technology again is really amazing. And I think we are nothing short of explorers. You know, those days people explored, they went out. You know, we are nothing short of these explorers. You know, we have been exploring every little, whether you talk about the Google Classroom, oh, there is The math teacher says, oh, I have to, work out this problem and show it to my students. Okay, there is a Jamboard for you for that, So these are things, which we've all learned, we've all explored and got it, So necessity, mother of wisdom, mother of invention. So that has made it, absolutely true for us right now and in these times.
Thank you, Mrs. Lalita. That was wonderful input. And as you said, because we get into a comfort zone, we have been continuing a certain level of classroom interaction, but we need to understand that this is the new normal, and we really don't know even now when life will be back to the old times. So I think it is very important mentally and psychologically for teacher, parent, student to realize that this is the way we are going to be living, maybe for next 2 years or 3 years, we don't know. Because even when things get back to normal, the prediction is that we have to maintain social distancing, we have to wear a mask because one virus goes, the other one comes, whatever. So what is important is if they're mentally prepared, rather than thinking, okay, in December we'll open and everything is going to be fine, they're going to be more like what you said, explorers. We need to understand, and virtually, creating that bond is very, very, in fact, I think it's very simple, 2-minute strategy. You can just take every child's name on the screen. Disha, you've got beautiful hair. Mrs. Lalita, I love your dupatta. Mrs. Sita, I love your earrings. And Shrey, I don't like it. I need to see your face. You can just mention anything just to build that bond with the child. And I think what you said, the takeaway, very important, those small groups, breakaway groups which you can create. I think that's sometimes not possible in a real classroom because it requires a lot of time, place, which in a running school we are always short of. So I think excellent tip you have given for that. Now we move on, and so we are talking about the 21st century skills, and one of the very important skill is collaboration. Today, the whole world, if you talk to Google, if you talk to any of the top employers, they're looking for people who can collaborate. And that is one skill. Somehow, it is somehow not developed in us. When we were in school, we were only taught to compete. We were never taught to collaborate. Hide your test, do your homework alone. And I think in a virtual classroom, suddenly the masks are fallen, the world is open, everything is open. And it's a beautiful time to collaborate. So I would really like to know from Mrs. Sita, who's of course IB, works on collaboration. What are your tips? How can one collaborate in a virtual classroom? Because I think teachers do find it a struggle because they feel there'll be noise. I mean, how do you think peer interaction, how can they do it? Yeah.
So thanks to what Lalita said, the breakout sessions, whether the Google Classrooms or the Zoom, they accommodate for the breakout sessions. Now it is your challenge as to how will you use this facility for building collaboration as a skill in students. Now again, I'll take you to the background of our entire learning environment. You would have heard about the sacred learning spaces, okay? This is something that we extensively work on. There are 3 sacred learning spaces. So one is cave time, where I go, I retrieve into a cell, into a cave, and try to understand what did I learn. So it's my reflection time. There's this other sacred learning space called watering hole. So where, in earlier days, the travelers used to sit around a water spot and find out, oh, you're coming from the north, what is there up north? You're coming from south, what is down there in the south? So they learn from one another. And the third thing is a campfire. Campfire is where the teacher stokes the fire and children take the warmth from it. So these 3 learning spaces is something that we have been consciously building into the learning environment otherwise. Now our challenge was, how do we bring it to the virtual classrooms, okay? Now cave time, of course, cave time. Children are at home, so they're always on their own. Then comes the campfire. The teacher-led classroom is the easiest thing in the world to do online, right? But it is a watering hole where how will we build collaboration, and what kind of collaboration are we looking at? Are we just allowing them to chat? Are we giving them an agenda? Okay. If we are giving them an agenda, is there a background and a foreground to it? So this breakout session, is it going to lead to a presentation, a group presentation or a project work or some such thing? So as I said earlier, that planning is something that we extensively work on. So in fact, this month, July, the entire month of July is called Project July for our online school. Okay, it starts from tomorrow. So each week we have one subject focus, and we created websites around it. We are sharing the links with them. And there's so many things that, like, time tracker, for their self-management skill. Now in collaboration, we have also given them 5 cooperative learning techniques. Now during your 1 hour breakout session in your groups, the teacher is going to put that on the table. She's going to leave it in the group, and now they're going to discuss, what did I do to learn this in my subject since morning? Which skill did I develop more? Was it sense making? Was it adaptive thinking? Was it new media literacy that I developed? Okay, even the collaboration is more focused with an agenda driven into it, because they love talking to each other. So, but the idea is not chatting. Idea is driving them with a direction to it. So that is something that we planned a lot extensively, and I'm eagerly looking forward, because from tomorrow it's going to roll out. We tried all this in technology in the last 1 month. How will the breakout sessions happen? What will be the tech glitches over there? How can the teacher steer? She has to move from one breakout session to the other. Will she be able to do that easily? All these teething problems we have overcome by 30th June. Now from tomorrow, this is going to be in operation, and I'm waiting to watch, because otherwise these were happening very well in the classroom. We have always group learning. Even our furniture is like, arranged like that for group learning. Now we are looking at that collaboration. And like Lalita mentioned about the Google Earth. So each group is assigned with a project that they have to do on Google Earth. Because, Google Earth, accommodates a treasure of ideas over there. So there is an agenda, there is a plan, there is an assigned skill that we expect them to develop and reflect upon it. So I'll wait and watch, but I know collaboration is key to learning, because I cannot live in a cave and learn. I have to learn with you, with Lalita, with Disha, and with everybody. So that's the focus that we have for the virtual school in July now.
Excellent. Those were lovely keywords you gave us.
Yes.
I think a lot of takeaways. The camp time, the water hole, and the campfire. Sorry, cave time. And I love the cave time. I really, for me, reflection is very important. And that's a very important skill we need to imbibe in the kids, because as adults, we generally do not reflect. And if we don't reflect, we're not going to be able to improve on whatever we have done. And it is also essential, because it, in the end of the day, it helps us recognize our aha moment and what exactly did we do right and what did we go wrong. So very, very pertinent, I think takeaways you have given, Mrs. Sita. I mean, I think a lot of schools would love to adopt that. Maybe they can give it a different name. Excellent. Thank you so much. Now I come to a very important question. So I've been working for 26 years, and I started my own consultancy in December, where my focus was training of the teachers and the leaders. And I think what my, I've been on the other side of the table, and what I feel in the schools, the priority for professional development is very, very low. And especially during this time, COVID time, I think the requirement for professional development of teachers is very important, especially to be able to cope in the new digital era. How do we do it? Like when we learn from each other, we attend webinars, and there's a lot of learning. Everything has some takeaway. So how do you think, Mrs. Lalita, how and why, how should the school do it? What is the kind of importance they should give? Because I feel very strongly that it's on a low priority in a budget of a school, professional development of teachers. So I really want to understand, with your experience, what do you feel and why it's so?
Yes. Well, I think, capacity building of teachers is absolutely essential. It's just like, sharpening the saw. Unless you do it, you're not going to get the output. I have, with my 30 years of experience in various schools, I can say that, there are some schools who plan for a year, use it for the next 10 years. There are schools which, work extensively on building the capacities of the teachers. Now, we are very fortunate at Meridian. We work a lot on working on the skills of teachers, and training is inbuilt into our whole system of functioning. So, we being an IB-PYP school too, we have extensive training from IB, which helps a lot. And IB insists, and also we find that it is essential that, to know the approaches to learning, what are the learner profiles, how do we, bring about, how do we develop a learning platform in which the student and teacher are co-learners, and how do we bring about this whole aspect. Because on one hand, you have teachers who have been traditionally trained. They have come from a B.Ed college or something, and they know, yes, they probably know the Bloom's taxonomy, but they don't know how to apply it. What are the ways in which they need to use the 5 E's of learning? These are some things that, colleges of learning education do not teach. So it's only when they get onto the field that they learn on the job. But what they're learning is, it's a very cloudy learning for them. Unless you kind of keep them, give them the nuances, which will then, put them in the right perspective of how children learn, what are the attributes each child has, how to use these attributes to bring about learning. How do you work with a positive reinforcement for the children? And these are things which they have to learn. And then, more importantly, how do you bring inclusivity in your classrooms? How do you deal with a heterogeneous class? Okay, so how do you deal with a gifted child? How do you deal with a child who has got learning challenges? These are things on the field. But we need to extensively train the teachers. For this, what we have is, we have 3 different types of learnings, which, training, I should say. One is a regular ongoing training, which we call, and I'm sure all IB schools also know this, that we call it collaborative meetings, where the teachers of that particular, grade get together along with the specialists, because we have the physical education, the art, music, every other aspect of learning, which has to get integrated. So you cannot have compartmentalized learnings. So unless you bring the collaboration of all of them sitting together, planning, and coming out with different strategies, okay, having one person or, a group of people guiding them from time to time. And then we encourage our teachers also to turn into resource persons. First, we make them take up certain parts of training in the collaborative meetings, and then we give them larger roles also. So this is one part of it, the collaborative meetings. The second one is the periodic trainings that we have. So we have inbuilt into our system itself, that we have 3 trainings through the year. And then we have the annual training program. So when we start off the academic year, we have a lot of teachers who would have left and new teachers have come in, and, so we train all of them once again. And it's a reiteration. See, training, if you give once, it doesn't mean that people are trained throughout. There are, new techniques, new, ways of teaching children or dealing with children. Even IB-PYP has come out with various. Now there is the enhanced PYP, where voice choice and, this is given more extensively to the child. Then how does the teacher leave the control and hand it over to the children to take the responsibility, to take the onus of their learning themselves? So these are things which teachers need to get trained up. So this annual training program is very important because we give them at whatever level, if it is a subject level, if it is a science for the grades from 6 to 12, then there is a separate training for them. If it's a social science, there's another training for them. If it is languages, there are different trainings for them. If it's the PYP, then they have a training for themselves. So it's not that, you have one training program, somebody coming, talking to them, and then everything is done. It's not because the training program, again, before starting off with the training program, we do a needs assessment. So when the teachers leave the school for the vacation, there is a needs assessment done on every teacher, telling that this is a kind of training I would like to have. Then we categorize, we put them together, and then the designing of the training program is a very important aspect of our school functioning, and we work on that extensively. So with all this training, I should say to a large extent, there is definitely a change, but then I cannot say that the change is 100%. So we have something what we call as the micro teaching. This is a technique where the teachers teach to their peers, and then always, after teaching the peers, there is a coaching that happens. The coaching is again very, positive reinforcement that is given to the teacher. But the teacher again, I will use Sita's the cave time thing. The teacher then goes on a reflective mode to say that, yes, I have done this, but I have not done this too well. So when that reflection comes, reflection in action and on action, it really brings about a change in the teacher. So I think these are the different techniques of training which we adopt in our school.
Excellent, Mrs. Lalita. Very important points you said, and I hope whoever is listening, I think the schools need to adopt this. I really liked, and that is important, the need assessment. Because most of the time I find the training is done offhand without realizing what the teacher actually needs in the classroom. So needs assessment must be done. And I love the concept of peer teaching. Of course, that's a peer coaching and reflection, which is very advanced form of, once the school reaches that level, and I'm sure congratulations to you that you've reached that level where you're able to inculcate that into the school. I think it's a very important part because training has to be continuous. If you just do the training for the heck of it, just 2 trainings, 1 training, nothing much is going to happen because the teacher is probably going to be energetic for 5 days, but as time passes, her motivation level goes down. So it has to be continuous and to be assisted by the plan, the way you said, the annual plan, the weekly plan, it needs to be part of the entire school structure and policy. I really appreciate you. Those are very good takeaways you have given for everybody. And now I have a very pertinent question for you, Mrs. Sita, and I'm sure a lot of viewers are dying to know that. So we have a situation, suddenly we are a virtual class, and as a teacher, we are used to teaching children, right? We are not used to teaching parents. And suddenly we have a parent head popping in the window and, trying to tell the teacher how she should teach, or he's not liking what is happening, so he shoots a letter to the school principal. I'm sure all of you are facing that kind of thing. Now, when we have a classroom teaching, then parent cannot enter, parent doesn't know. He's only seeing the learning. But now he's seeing what he's not required to see, because teaching is something we are trained to teach kids. We are not trained to teach parents. So how do you think, what is your takeaway on that? How do you think, how much a parent should be involved, or what is the kind of thing we look forward to?
Okay, so I would say like this, that it's not right to feel that parents are peeping into the classroom. They're inquisitive, let them. Okay, it's their child. At the end of the day, it's their child. So what we did was, when we started communicating to the parents that you're most welcome to sit with your children. Okay, but we had certain agreements on that, saying that be well dressed. Okay? It's a formal classroom. sorry, it's a formal classroom. It's not a casual get together. So if you are sitting with your child, make sure that you're formally dressed. Okay. And if you are sitting with your child and there's a conversation happening amongst the children and the teacher, please don't intervene at that time. If you have something that you want to say, message to the teacher. Okay. So much of communication from us, in so many ways that we told them that, don't push the child to answer. Don't, now start comparing why did that child answer the question and why did you not answer that question. Don't do all this because we know what parents usually do. Okay. So foreseeing that, we condition the parents that don't do this. I think it's a way of reverse psychology. If you say that you may want to do it, but don't do this. You may want to do this, but don't do it. Okay. So we started seeing, I must tell you, there was a grade 2 child who was with his, headphones in the classroom. The parent, the mother came peeping. Suddenly he switched off the video. And a second later, switched on the video and the mother is not there. So we know what happened. So the children started teaching the parents that it's my class, don't interfere. We also told the parents that your presence will make the child inhibited. He will not be himself because you have certain expectation from the child. And because of your presence, his inhibition, learning may get, restricted. So it's up to you. We leave it to you. Whether you want your child to learn happily or under your supervision all the time, or whether you want to pick things from what the teacher said, we leave it to you. How this entire thing is going to be respectfully handled depends on how you and us partner in this entire thing. So I would say 99.9% we didn't have any problems. Okay, 0.1% will always be there. You can't change the world, but at least if you have changed some percentage of them, you should be happy with that. So I had seen scenes of mother feeding the child during the classroom. Okay. Yeah. So then we told the child, I think there is a lunch break time also. Why do you want to eat now? Okay. So even a grade 1 child understands now that this is school, this is not home. I can't lounge in the bed, lounge in the sofa, sit in the classroom. And even if the parents are encouraging, they're telling the mother. So there was one scene like, the mother was sitting in the sofa reading a magazine, shaking her legs and all that. So we told the child, oh, your mother is in the class too. And he quickly turned back, told the mother to leave them. There. Okay. So children are under your influence. You tell children positively, never criticize, because at the end of it, they're their children, not our children. They're our students only. Okay. You can't point a parent for coming into a classroom, but you can have an understanding with the parent that if this classroom has to be effective, you need to be good partners with us. And that's exactly what we did.
Excellent, Mrs. Sita. I think those are very valid points. And if I may add, what we call, like we have etiquettes in a class. Yeah. We can use the word netiquettes and send a little mail, develop a partnership with the parent, because it's very, very important to understand that parents are our partners in education, and the role of a parent becomes more important during this time, which is here to stay for some time. And I think it's a very good strategy that the children are under your control. So communicate to the children what exactly you want and be a professional. That is something I really appreciate, that a parent, if he wants to come in the meeting, okay, fine, but be professionally dressed, no feeding time. So again, an advice to the parents, then fix a routine, because that's very important. That gives your child some sort of satisfaction and, a sense of surety and safety, because he's used to that environment when he goes to a school. So let's try and create, don't turn your home into a school, but create that environment which is important, which the child is used to. So a very important takeaway, I think. And I think we had a great discussion and the clock is ticking. And of course, Disha, we can go on. And I would love to interact more with Ms. Lalita and Ms. Sita, because I think they have given us some valid takeaways, which are very, very important. And I really want to thank you all. And a big thanks to Disha And of course, Metamorphosis, with whom I've been associated. I think you guys are doing a wonderful job in your developing the entrepreneurial skills and your program for grade 6 to 12. Because I think at the end of the day, everybody is looking for the skills. Skills have become more important than the knowledge. So as a school, we are giving the knowledge and we're trying to give the skills. But you as an expert are giving them the life skills. And I think I really want to thank you and appreciate. And thank you once again, Ms. Sita and Ms. Lalita. Pleasure having interacted with you and hoping the lockdown to be over. And I'm going to fly down and see you in person. Thank you so much. Over to you, Disha.
Yeah. Thank you, Shalini ma'am. It was great listening to you. Thank you, Sita ma'am. Thank you, Lalita ma'am. Really, really enriching conversation for all of us listening to you. So we have 3 small questions from the audience. I'm just going to pose one of each to each one of you. So the first question is, Mr. Srinivas has asked us this. Is there any insight on how average or below average students are performing in the virtual environment? Anyone could take up this question.
So I would say this, Disha, that all of us now, or many schools, have a differentiated instruction learning program. Okay, whatever plans that the teachers do already cater for different kinds of learners. Okay, the same thing is happening online also now. In some of the cases where we have special needs children, we are holding separate classes for them. But in the mainstream, the engagements are planned in such a way that every child can achieve something, so that the child doesn't feel that she's getting a less attention or special attention. Yes, it is working very well for them, in my opinion. Yeah.
If I can add just one point, I would request a parent or a teacher not to use the word average, because no child is average. They are different they have different capabilities. Every child is bright, every child is a genius. So let's focus that he lacks certain skills in particular subject. So when you use the word average, it lowers the self-esteem of a child, I feel.
All right, thank you so much for that. Our next question, okay, so we have Mr. Pavan asking you this. Firstly, he is wishing all of you a very happy Guru Purnima. So his question is, do we see a new hierarchy in schools with digital or physical learning? And can we see some engineers joining the school? Shani?
Yeah, you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think education is changing. It's a very new normal. It's more of collaboration. The hierarchy was I'm sure you're aware how Western education came into India. It was during the time of the Britishers. It was introduced. Basically, the idea was to convert us into babus. Right, and we somehow followed it, like a regimented routine where it followed in like the Industrial Revolution, where the workers would come to school and go back, and all those things happened. And I think what the 21st century talks about is that we need to create different kind of, like the virtual classroom is giving a lot of different choices. And, they're giving you the capability of choosing the time a teacher can take the class. The breakaway groups can take place when a child probably is more alert, because everybody has their prime time. My prime time may be morning. The personalized attention can be brought in, the critical thinking skills, problem solving. I mean, whatever we imagined and we spoke in conferences all this time, I am so excited that the COVID is like a golden opportunity for us to put that into practice. And it is happening. When you spoke about, the last question was about how do we deal, like Ms. Sita said, we differentiated instruction as part of the curriculum, and it's very easy now in a virtual class. To your question, are engineers going to be joining in? Yes, definitely. Why not? With my experience, I tell you, I'm also a B.Ed. I had to do it, but B.Ed really doesn't teach you anything. It just gives you that trademark that, okay, you can be a teacher. But I have always preferred people who have worked for a long time in the corporate. I did that. I worked in the airlines, and then I came into teaching profession because then it is my passion. I'm not coming into teaching for money. So I think engineers, doctors, you wait and see. The turnaround has started happening. Yes. People like that are going to be coming in because it's virtual. An engineer can come and say, okay, Mrs. Sita, can I take your class on physics? She would jump at it. It's all virtual. It's nobody is, you're not, there's no competition now. It's all about collaboration. So I think we must thank COVID for the good fortune it has given the education sector, which we are not realizing. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini ma'am. That was really insightful. I really agree with you, and that's where we're heading for. Lalita ma'am, you could take this question. How are you keeping the teachers and students motivated during the pandemic? Making them adapted to new methodology requires new energy levels. So how are we catering to that?
Well, I think teachers, by nature are pretty resilient, They adapt and change very easily. And that's the beauty of being a teacher. Because, no teacher, at least I have not come across any such, very rigid teachers, I should say. They're always open to suggestions, and they're open to new ideas and new ways and so on. So that is something, which came very naturally. Now, students, you will not believe. Initially, when we started the classes, the students were very enthusiastic. I have come across many students who took a long time to submit their assignments and their projects, normally. Online, these were the students who submitted first. So that makes it, quite a, shift from the normal function. But today, this Gen Z, they are pretty well versed with technology. For them, they took to technology like fish took to water. For them, it was not a big thing. And they actually started enjoying this more than a normal class, I should say. Except that they mix their, their games and their sports and their other visual performing activities and so on, which is also what we provided them. We did provide that also in the regular, intermittently, like, just having them to learn math and science and social and so on was very monotonous. So we gave them, we gave them dance in between, we gave them some music in between, some art in between. So this kind of, blended the whole thing very well. But teachers and students, it did not take very long for them to adjust to this new normal. And they are pretty well versed. Right now, things are moving in a very good direction. And we hope this will continue until the pandemic ends. Unless, there are other forces in the society wanting to scuttle our online classes. So I hope that doesn't happen and it goes on normally. Yes. So I don't foresee a great disturbance in the online classes otherwise. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lalita ma'am. So that's the end of the Q&A round. Thank you so much once again. Thank all of you, Shalini ma'am, Lalita ma'am, Sita Murthy ma'am. It was really nice to have you. Very, very thoughtful. And I think everyone watching this discussion has taken off a lot of points from what we've discussed. So looking forward to a lot more conversations. And thank you so much. And we'll be joining in the next week as well with Dialogue with Educationists. So stay tuned. Stay safe and see you next week. Goodbye and thank you so much.